the experience of life is just that, an experience. And all experience is subjective. And all subjectivity is exclusively yours. It's from the point of view of the one who is experiencing it. So your experience of life is your own unique subjective experience of life, and it happens exclusively in your own mind. And I think I should stop the video here. I don't blame you if you won't continue watching, because yeah, I'll try to deconstruct that. So why am I talking about these things? First of all, they seem too philosophical and high level and intangible and impractical for someone who is an engineer and should be more, down to earth, right? More sticking to facts and all this kind of hard language that seems to evade the minds of this type of person. But it so happens that I became in love with the unexplainable and with paradoxes and with not understanding almost anything about anything. I resisted a lot, and I found a lot of time in my life a refuge in what I was able to understand, and discarding everything else, because everything else that was not easily understandable by my own mind was threatening by default. And it was easy to cast a judgment and throw a label as boring, non-interesting, irrelevant. What's in it for me, right? What do I gain if I start to deconstruct the nature of reality? What does it even mean? What do I care, right? And I don't think this journey is something that you consciously choose for yourself. So I think these videos is a perfect filter for the person who is actually experiencing something similar like me, which is nice. So welcome if you're still here in 2 minutes and 30 seconds in the video. So for me, these discussions help me live life with more ease and be more at peace in the day-to-day. Because again, if everything is subjective, if everything happens exclusively in my mind, from what I can tell for sure, then there is nothing out there to threaten me. There is nothing out there to scare me or run away from or try to avoid. If everything is happening exclusively in my own mind, and my mind is giving a voice to some, neural circuits, like cortical constructs, like brain structures, right, which are some biological, which are part of a biological organ, so it evolved through time, right? We know that the most primitive life forms on Earth came about 1 billion years ago. So they were unicellular organisms. And then you had eukaryote life, multicellular. And then from that, it's like 500 million years ago, and then we started to evolve as complex organisms. But experience of what was out there was always contained, right? We can imagine complex forms of life to appear, let's say 500 million years ago, and then 200 million years ago, we already had some forms of dinosaurs and so on, with brains sufficiently developed to perceive reality in a certain way, right? They were just, at some point aware of things happening around them, and they started to develop mechanisms to survive, to eat, to get food, right? And that was the primal driver of our own evolution also, to survive, to make the most out of our environment, to gather resources, to eat and survive. And make sure that we are not eaten, right? Make sure that we have shelter and we can eat and, we are safe. And this is the primal driver of our species also, of all species in the world. But this default way of going through life doesn't or didn't up to this point allow us to think deeper at the meaning of life itself, because that was not really an important concern, right? When evolution pushed for developing the brain structures that help us optimize for our own energy conservation and maximize the chances that we survive yet another day and we can escape or avoid some predators, it's very difficult to start to repurpose this brain and the typical thought patterns, which are survival oriented, to repurpose them towards thinking bigger and deeper at the meaning of life. There was no utilitarian purpose in thinking about this kind of stuff. And yet, they are the most important things to understand for yourself, right? I'm not saying that you should trust me about anything. You should experience and do everything that you consider necessary to get to these deeper truths. Why? Because they allow you to recontextualize your life. They allow you to put everything into a bigger perspective and not detach emotionally from your context of life when it gets hard, not disconnect from it, but impose consciously a distance that allows you to see things in a better way, right? In a proper framing, in a way that is constructive for you. And I think this is why these questions are worth investigating, because if you get this vantage point, this higher point of view that allows you to contextualize hardship and struggle in your life, then you will not experience struggle and hardship in your life, that often at least. And when it happens, you will not jump to conclusions, to default ways of thinking, that this is bad, this should not happen, this is wrong, this is whatever, right? This is the default way of operating. We are always projecting into the so-called future, which is a fiction, right? An illusion. It's a construct of the mind. The future doesn't exist. Technically speaking, it doesn't exist. The only thing that exists is this thing here, whatever we call it, the present, the now, this moment, whatever you call it, this is it. I mean, there is nothing else. And all our life is a constant permanent unfolding of this moment and our experience of it. And that's it. Because the brain has, again, the capacity to create the illusion of the past and the future, and we have memories, and we can remember things that happened, right? But you remember those things that happened still in this moment. So what you are doing in this moment is you are transposing yourself through your mind and through your thoughts in a different world, in a way. But you are still doing it now. This is your experience of the now, projected in the past, right? Or in the future. Whatever you want to do with your mind. You can isolate yourself completely in your mind, right? And you are not even aware that you are doing it. The best evidence and example for this is dreams, right? In dreams, most often you have no idea that you're dreaming. And sometimes it's so strange that reasonably you should understand that this is a dream and you should just challenge what's happening there and wake up, and like, come on, man, this is a dream, of course. It happened to me once in my life when I was cornered by a huge dragon. And I was like, man, I'm gonna die, right? So this cannot be right. And it's also like the dragon, like it's so real, cannot be. And I challenged the dragon and I woke up. But 99% of the time, of course, we don't even know we are dreaming, no matter how strange and wicked the dreams are. And that's strange if you think about it, right? You are sitting on a pillow, like completely knocked off, right? You are out of normal awareness, like normal consciousness, and still you have this rich experience with your eyes closed about the world and the colors and things and textures and faces of people and things that you might have already lived, or just there are inventions in real time of your own mind, and then we wake up and it's like normal, nothing happened, but is it? I mean, I'm not saying that we should interpret the dreams. I'm just saying about the nature of a dream, how hallucinated it is, right? And that dream happens exclusively in your brain, and then your mind interprets the signals, right? The connections, the neural connections, and the neural activity in the brain as being that experience of you doing something in this fictitious world. But if we don't even question the absurdity of living such a vivid experience in our dreams and we take it as being normal, why would we question the nature of this reality, right? Of the waking reality, which is not that far away from the controlled reality that we are hallucinating in our dreams. I would argue it's not that different. It's a bit different in the sense that, yes, you can better predict things according to the laws of physics as we know them, in terms of things, having to be in a certain way, and you have evidence of the laws of physics actually working in this world because all your life you relied on them, and your brain is comfortable now because it can project things happening according to these implicit laws of physics that you already know, like gravity, for example. In your normal wakeful reality, you won't see things, raising from the ground, which you might see in a dream. But yet, this experience of life, this experience of reality in the wakeful state, it's still to a point a controlled hallucination. It's still a controlled hallucination. Why? Because it's still happening exclusively in our brain. Again, life is experienced exclusively subjective, and it's unique to you, and it's unique to me, but it's a different experience. It's not the same experience. You don't feel the same things when you are exposed to a certain situation. I don't feel the same emotions when your family argues. You don't feel my emotions when my kids argue or when they argue with me, right? You don't really care. You don't feel the same emotions when you see my car getting scratched. I don't feel the same emotions when yours gets scratched. Why is that? Well, because you have different emotional attachments. What does it mean? It means that you are constructing your reality, you are projecting your reality, you are giving color to your subjective experience of reality according to your own predispositions, according to what was meaningful to you up to that point, according to the beliefs that you've created in your mind up to that point, right? According to things, objects, and people in your life that you emotionally attached to and you formed your identity around, right? But this is still something that happens exclusively in your mind. You have different neural circuits that give you this subjective experience of life, which is, of course, different than mine. But the point I'm trying to make is that there is nothing that happens outside your mind. There is nothing that escapes the interpretive layer of your mind. Think about this. Everything out there is similarly happening in here. If you feel something like an internal tension and you say, okay, this is internal to my body, okay, where do you feel it? How do you feel it? It gets processed in the brain and your mind interprets the feeling and it gives a certain interpretation. What does it mean? It means that you have some thoughts about that, right? You feel in a certain way, and then you start to think about the feeling. But the feeling is felt in your body, but the mind and thoughts are interpreted in your mind, right? Which stays here, which is typically a byproduct of the brain, right? As we understand it today. But imagine touching something. I'm touching a chair in front of me, right? Where is that thing happening? Where is the chair? The chair, in terms of talking about it with normal language, I would say, yeah, the chair is there. It's not here, right? The chair is not me. Okay. But what is the experience of me touching the chair? Yet just another neural connection, a neural pathway, and a pattern of connections in my brain that give the subjective experience of me touching an external object, and then the mind interpreting that action with the overlay of thoughts that just give more texture to the experience in a subjective way, sufficiently enough to give me the illusion that the chair is out there and I'm touching something outside of me. And so people don't think that you're crazy. For sure, we should still talk like that in in the world, right? But why is this important to understand? Why is it important? Why was it for me important to understand that everything happens in my mind exclusively? Exclusively. I can imagine that things happen also similarly in your mind, but I have no means to really know that. And I don't need to know that. What I know is that everything that I experience in my life, everything happens in my mind, and it's my whole universe. All this universe is mine in a way. The way I perceive the universe, the amount of details I can learn when it comes down to how big this universe is, right? How many light years away is a certain galaxy, or how many types of stars there are. What's the distance from the Earth to the sun? How much time the light takes to travel from there? Where is the moon? How many planets there are? What is a neutron star made of? How it was made like that? Everything, conceptually speaking, everything that I know about this universe, including the word universe itself, is part of my own unique universe. When I'll die, I'll take all of this with me. And this very exact understanding and interpretation of the universe that we all share will go away with me. And you will have your own version of this universe. And no versions of this universe as we interpret it is, in absolute terms, what this universe is. There are no 100% correct interpretations. Why? Because they are interpretations. They are still projected, understandings. They are constructs. Our understandings are just simply artifacts of our own projections of thoughts, of imaginations into the world. And around that, we create our own subjective experience of what's out there. But the universe itself, all the stars, everything, where are they? They might look and feel and be, right, in theory at least, much, at a much greater distance than the chair in front of me is. But are they? In terms of me experiencing the stars and the moon, are the stars and the moon farther away than the chair in front of me? In one way of looking at it, yes. So people don't think you are crazy. But in another way, like in a real, purely subjective way, and technical way, I would dare to say, they are all at the same distance in your mind, right? You expose yourself, your eyes, to the light from the star, and then that light gets reflected, and projected, inversed into the retina, and then you have some neural activity there to translate light into electrical signal, and then that electrical signal gets processed inside a structure in the brain, and then the overlay of thinking, right, done by your mind automagically, right, happens. And then you have this subjective experience of looking at a star. But can you see how many translations happened in between? And we take it for granted, right? It's like, oh, this is a star, okay, but where is it? And then you take constellations, right? You have, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 stars in a certain form, in a certain pattern, and from this angle, from this perspective, they look like in the same 2D plane, right? And they are looking like Ursa Minor or whatever, right? But these are like independent stars, thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of light years away one from each other. And from a planet close to one of those stars, if you look at us, you won't see the Ursa Minor, you won't see anything, you will see different patterns. But we take them as being something, as being a symbol. And then your mind starts to interpret that symbol. And then you have astrology, which has all sorts of layers of interpretation because the mind can interpret, for eternity things and still not getting to the point. Because there is no way to get to the point. And we accept implicitly, unconsciously, to live in this permanent state of confusion and controlled hallucination by projecting our own interpretation of the world onto what actually happens there, so we can feel safe, so we can feel that we have some sort of sense of agency and that we can control, right, what's out there, because we can anticipate, we can predict. And I'll end this video on this very important concept, which is control. We need control to feel safe. We need control in our lives so we can predict what's happening next. Because if we can't predict that, we will feel threatened. We will start to feel anxious. We will not be able to live peacefully because we don't know what to expect. And when you don't know what to expect, you can end up, being hurt and ultimately dying, right? Behind this need of control is the fear of dying. If you go a few layers deep, you ask, what am I actually afraid of, right? And you will realize that control is simply a byproduct of a scared mind. And the mind is always scared because the mind cannot really predict what's out there, and it knows it. So this whole philosophical understanding of my subjective experience, I would invite you to consider it also for yourself and do similar exercises, because you will get to define for yourself what control really means and how you can actually be in control of your life. If everything happens inside here, irrespective of it being part of you or out there, if everything is an interpretation of what's out there inside your mind, then from a purely objective reality point of view, you have zero control in terms of your mind being able to predict. You have zero control. There are a virtually infinite number of variables that you have zero means to control, to the level of the granularity in which you can predict the exact way that the next moment, right? This ongoing moment will unfold a few moments from now, or even one moment from now, in its whole complexity, in its entire complexity. You have no means to predict, right? What you can predict are the few variables that matter most to you because they are more likely to influence how safe you will feel by controlling them. But the more variables you want to control in this objective reality from your mind's interpretation point of view, the more anxious you will become, of course. Because you will realize the sheer complexity of being able to actually control stuff, and your mind will just struggle, and the byproduct of a struggling mind and an overloaded brain is anxiety and stress. So what's a better alternative? So we said that from purely technical point of view, the objective reality out there cannot be controlled. But if that objective reality, let's say, is simply not perceivable, and you only get a subjective interpretation of reality, which is happening always inside your mind, then you can control that, right? And I always talk about this. If you can control the narrative of what's happening, if you can decide on the meaning of what's happening and the interpretation of what's happening, which is anyway what you're doing always, it's not like your mind stops and you only use interpretation and judgment of what's happening there on demand when you want. It happens always by default. I'm just suggesting that you can start to take control of the process and realize that this interpretation of what's out there is in your control. And when you consciously assume this responsibility, which is a beautiful responsibility ultimately, you feel really free. Because you realize that life itself is nothing but an interpretation of what's happening to you. From a purely subjective experience of it, life is only your own interpretation of it. And the feelings and the emotions and the states that you are going through following those interpretations. And this is just a loop, right? It's a feedback loop that fuels, that compounds on itself. You feel something about stuff. You start to build an interpretation of that layer. By default, you typically give it a negative interpretation because this is how the brain evolved. Think about negative stuff first so you can protect yourself and stay alive. And then those thoughts, typically negative, they start to generate more negative emotions that you interpret as being negative, right? And then it fuels on itself. And then you start to develop some limitations, subjective, of course, of yourself in terms of how you project, your understanding of a stranger, that you are not feeling safe anymore, around people because they hurt you, and all this kind of absolute statements about the world that will inevitably create your own subjective prison that you will then be, constrained by. You cannot escape it. You cannot avoid it anymore because you've built it so thoroughly in such a waterproof way with so many layers of meaning and so on that you cannot just drop it because this is who you are. This leads then, it bleeds into your personality and how you perceive yourself to be and how others perceive yourself to be. And then you have to protect this identity. You cannot just be different all of a sudden, right? Because people would not feel comfortable with you being different. Because you being in the way that they project you in their own mind is what makes them feel safe around you. If you start now to say, okay, you know what? In the past 10 years, I've built these limiting beliefs and now I drop all of them and now I'm a free person. The next time when you will see your best friend, they will think you're crazy. And they will not understand this, all of a sudden incredible freedom that you have. It's a process. It takes a lot of time. It takes me ongoing dedication to this process for 5 or 6 years now, and assuming the implications of people who knew me before to think that I might, go a bit mad sometimes, or that, this is not normal what I'm doing. Why do I have these interests? Because I was supposed to be only an engineer and work at that place and only think about things which are technical or whatever, right? But again, this is not my problem. This is their projection. I am my former identity, the way I was in this world, was enough for them to project their understanding of who I am and what I'm doing, and get that limited sample of me and cement that, like create an artifact in their mind about me around those descriptions. And now I have to fit that category, right? Now, because I'm different in terms of behavior, like values, ways of looking at life than I was 6 or 7 years ago, this is scary for someone who wants to anticipate my behavior, wants to know that I'm behaving in the exact same predictable way as they knew me right before, based on the evidence, based on the proof that they've collected around me from our own interaction. So you cannot just drop all this, but hearing me talk about this might motivate you slightly and encourage you to dare to start the investigation, which will never end, by the way. This world is so complex that you can always evolve new ways of understanding it. But if you reach the point of really knowing deep down that what you're experiencing in life is your sole responsibility of making it a nice experience, right? Then you get to true freedom, right? Like Einstein said that the most important decision we have to make is whether we believe to live in a friendly or a hostile universe. So I decided for myself that I live in a friendly universe. Why is that decision so critical? Because by default, everyone believes they live in a hostile universe. Because this is how we are programmed by default through evolution to fear things, right? To run away from danger, to protect ourselves, to gather resources. So when you live in this state of survival, you cannot think creatively. You cannot think about deeper things, right? Like the meaning of life and so on. But if you decide, this is the powerful thing, by the way, the decision, right? Einstein framed beliefs as decisions, which is amazing. So you have total freedom in changing how you look at things. If you decide that you live in a friendly universe, then the world is your oyster, right? As they say. Because then everything happens for you. Your mind starts to interpret challenges, not in a judgmental, detrimental, running away from, forcing different circumstances way. It allows things to happen as they happen, and then they see those happenings as a gift. Because if this universe is friendly to me, then I frame everything that's happening to me in this light. So it must help me. If this universe is friendly, then what happens cannot be bad for me, even if I don't understand it, even if my mind is incapable to understand what's happening to me now. It must be good in the long term, and it must be for me, right? And I already have a very good example of this being the case. When I lost my mother, first of all, when I heard that she had cancer, I was devastated, as you can imagine. And I was devastated, for many, many, many years until, and even, after she passed away in December 2023, I was still deeply suffering, and I am still deeply suffering. At the same time, all these efforts that I did in these past 6 years allowed me to somehow transcend this suffering and see that this is not some experience that I can just throw the label of, inconsequential on what happened, right? Like, it was just a negative thing. It was random. It should not have happened, right? And cast this whole negative judgment on the whole situation on itself. Now I have enough perspective. Again, the contextualization thing. I did this work for myself so I can now choose a positive interpretation of what happened to her, right? This unconscious sacrifice that she did, right, for me, so I can live a better life. This is how I frame it now. This is my truth, right? This is not an objective truth. No one has to agree with me. Everyone has the right to go through their own grievance and their own interpretations of what happens, and they are, of course. But for me, this is so powerful because now I feel empowered, right, by her gift, and feel this nice honor of making the most out of this lesson. Very hard lesson, very difficult to go through, right? Very painful, a lot of suffering. And yet, If now I look at the universe as being a friendly universe and this happening for me, I cannot run away from this responsibility of making the most out of her sacrifice. Can you see how nothing is good or bad in itself unless you make it good or bad by the way you think about it? And this is everything. This is everything that we do in life. We are interpreting things that happen to us and we let them guide our next decisions. And if we accept the default interpretation of something which is always negative, then we cannot build the kind of life that we are aspiring to build for ourselves and that we would be proud of, right? Towards our end, let's say, when you look back. You want to be proud of what you lived. And if your whole life is colored by these negative aspects because of the way that you interpret those things, then you will inevitably have a lot of regrets because you know deep down that you could have lived it better and different, right? So I invite you to discover this for yourself. I invite you to look at your subjective experience of life. Where does it happen? The real control that you have, which is not in controlling the circumstances, is not in controlling what's out there. What's out there is happening naturally as you are happening naturally, right? Your own existence is part of what's happening. The flow of life is going, right? It doesn't need your approval, it's just going. You are part of it, you are just going. What you can do on top of that, and in that same flow ultimately, is how you interpret the flow. Is this flow good for me or bad for me? If you think that the flow is bad for you, then you will struggle. You will resist something that is impossible to resist, right? The flow of life will go on. You will age. You will adapt in this life. You will transform. You will become inevitably 5 years older, 10 years older, 20 years older. You will die. And you cannot do anything about it. And this is the flow of life. It will take you with it. You want it or you don't want it, you want to grow, you want to transform, you want to develop yourself or not, you will still end up somewhere 5 years from now or 10 years from now. You will end up somewhere. Why not take ownership of this process? Why not be in alignment with the flow of life? Let it be as it is, then make your decisions, learn what you can learn from it, and then grow from the experience. Why grow from the experience? Because now you have a moral responsibility to help also others see what you're seeing. Because if you can grow, then it means that you learn a lesson. And if you learn something, you have the responsibility of sharing it with others. And this is why I'm doing this. Because during my learning process, during my growth, during this journey that I'm on in consciously, I feel compelled to fuel it by these talks and also reach maybe one person who might benefit from it and might do something different to impact someone else in their lives in a positive way. Right? The butterfly effect. It's for me the most glorious mission possible in life to know that I can influence positively someone whose life can then influence positively someone else, and so on and so on and so on and so on. This can have incredibly positive impact, like generations to come, from what would be a seemingly non-interesting, philosophical, useless video on YouTube from a random guy. And both are true in a way, right? But at the same time, if there is this even small chance of having this impact, it's worth the effort. Of course it's worth the effort. And again, it's a very nice responsibility to have. These videos are very generative for me. They give me such a nice positive energy, you cannot imagine. So if anything, I'm doing it also for me, because if I'm doing this, I then can contribute better. So appreciate whoever is able to reach to this point, and I invite you to explore. Happy exploration.